The majority of the people I speak to do this for a couple of hours a day alongside a regular job. I mean, and some of them will make a few $100s a month. Some of them may be a few $1,000s a month. Maybe in some cases sort of up into the five figures of 10,000 or more per month. And this can vary. There's a lot of different factors involved with getting to these regular levels, but it definitely can be done.
Welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the show that is laser focused to inspire you to take action to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. I'm your host, Joan Posivy, author of The Way Success Works. I've been curious. I wanted to find out if it was still possible to make money buying and selling domain names. To find answers, I turned to James Iles, someone who's been involved in that space since he was about 17, 18 years old when he started doing it as a side hustle. Later, he became a blogger in the community. And since last December, he's taken on the role of Global Domain Investing Community Manager for GoDaddy. In this episode, James shares his insights on the critical step you need to take prior to putting any money down to buy domains as an investment, how to determine if a particular one is a good choice, what it might be worth, as well as costs involved. We also talk about what you can expect to earn working at it a couple hours a day, and a fun fact about the .ai extension. Now here's someone whose world revolves around all things domain investing, James Iles. Well, welcome, James.
Thank you. Really good to be here. Excited.
Well, tell us a bit about your role with GoDaddy.
I'm the domain investment community manager. And essentially that means that I'm a bridge between the domain investment community and GoDaddy. From a community perspective, I bridge the gap for domain investors. I bring feedback to GoDaddy to help guide our future product updates. And then from a GoDaddy side, I provide data, I provide insights, I provide information, blog posts, all that kind of thing for the community to help them on their journey of domain name investing, really.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like you've got your finger on the pulse of the domain investment community then.
Yeah, I like to think so. I mean, I've been at GoDaddy since December 2022, so it hasn't been that long, really. But my history before GoDaddy has been generally in the domain name community. So I like to think that I've got a good overall view of what's happening in the community in the domain investment world.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. What is your background in domain investing?
So domain investing has kind of been a part of most of my adult life. I've been around domain name investing in some way since probably I was about 18, 19, when I stumbled across domain names as a kind of a side hustle to what I was doing at the time.
Okay.
I spent a long time buying and selling domain names. And then eventually in 2015, I started writing blog posts for the community on a number of different platforms. So everything's kind of gone from there, really.
It sounds like it's been in your blood for a long time.
Yeah, it's almost like it's in my DNA now. I couldn't imagine being in another world, really.
Yeah. Well, in this day and age, is it still possible to make money flipping domain names?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A lot of people started in the 90s. So domain names were first around in the 1980s. And a lot of people did get into domain names as an investment product in the 1990s. But there's been so many people that have come on board since then. And in the last few years, especially since COVID, it's come into focus as like a good side hustle that is really accessible for people. Yeah, at GoDaddy, we see a lot of people signing up for Domain Academy, which is our education product. We see a lot of people every day coming into domain investing and kind of just being a bit curious about how to make money with domain names alongside their regular job. Yeah.
Is there a cost to that academy?
It's part of the Domain Discount Club premium membership.
Oh, okay. I guess the perception from someone from the outside looking in is, well, like all the good domain names are already gone. So is it possible to have a good side hustle in domain names?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. If that is something that I wanted to do, where would I start?
A good domain name education is the best foundation for this. Over the years, I've been guilty of it myself. I've been too enthusiastic. I've rushed in, bought domain names, registered them, bought them in what we call the aftermarket. Yeah, I think everyone has a story around a domain name that they bought.
It's going to be huge, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you have all these dreams about the domain name, and then it falls flat a few months later when you kind of realize actually the value might not be there. So I think a really good education around domain names is a excellent start. Yeah, that can take the form of Domain Academy, but there are resources out there. There's networking opportunities. There's databases full of domain name sales, so you can kind of get an understanding of what sells. But Domain Academy gives an overview of why things sell and how to find the domain names that can sell, really.
So how would I know, for example, if a domain name is a good investment?
So domain investing, essentially, I feel like it boils down to quality and desire. There's two real similarities to real estate in that way. So a commercial property might be a valuable property if it has good fall, if it has good location.
Right.
And that's the same with a domain name online. If it's a good location, if it's a desirable location, then that can up the value. I could get really deep into domain valuation, but I think a good overall kind of level is just those two qualities, really.
Okay, so what would I look for to determine that value?
So in terms of valuing a domain name, there's the length of a domain name. A good domain name tends to be relatively short. A good domain name tends to be .com. There's a whole world of other domain extensions out there, but to start with, I'd probably stick with .com domain names.
Okay.
There's keywords. There's desirability of those keywords. There's combination of keywords. There's a lot of different factors involved in valuing a domain name, really.
What's the connection between a domain name and keywords?
So a domain name can contain specific keywords. It can contain one keyword, two keywords, three keywords. It's the combination of those words and how that relates to general products. It could be that a company wants to brand around those specific keywords. And if a domain name is generic enough, there can be a lot of different companies that want to brand around that or have existing brands around that domain name. So again, desirability and quality can really up the value of these domains.
And where could I look for information that would help me determine that value?
There's a great domain sales database that gets updated every single day. They've got something like $2.3 billion worth of domain sales in the database. That's called NameBio.com.
Sorry, name?
It's NameBio, NameBio.com.
Okay.
And so that's a pretty wide-ranging database full of domain name sales. It's great place to start.
All right. So what would it show me?
NameBio would show you the latest sales from today.
Okay. But
aside from that, it would show you whatever domain sales you kind of want to see from the last probably 20, 25 years. I don't know how far back actually it goes, but
sure.
Yeah, it'll give you a good overview and you can go really specific on the type of domain names, the type of keywords that you want to enter. GoDaddy has, I don't know whether you've stumbled across it, but GoDaddy's got a valuation model. So it uses all of its back data to kind of understand what a domain might be worth. It's called GoValue. It's on the GoDaddy site. And essentially typing a domain name in there, GoDaddy will provide you with what it thinks the domain could be worth to someone. So a lot of people use this as a kind of a basis of what the domain might be worth to someone. So it's a valuable resource. It's available for free, and it uses a whole ton of GoDaddy data that we've kind of compiled over the years to determine what a domain could sell for. So it's a really good guide in order to understand domain value basics, really.
Okay. You'd mentioned earlier in the conversation the almost using real estate as an analogy or a metaphor. And I found that when it comes to tax assessments, depending on the region, they can be spot on. And in others, they're lower than the actual market value. What's been your experience, or can you even speak to, accuracy isn't the right word, but using that domain value, like if I plug in domain name and it says it's worth 1,000, are they generally sold around that, or should I be knocking off 20% as far as a realistic value? So
for me, I use GoValue as a guide. If it tells me it's worth several $1,000s, for example, then I take that as a guide that it's valuable. For some of my domain names, I've stuck to that estimated value. But for others, I then go out and then I have a look. So, for example, I do use Domain Academy tools for this. There's a valuation worksheet on there where you can get really specific and get a good specific guideline for each domain name. So
Okay.
Yeah, it gives a good overview.
So for the freebie one, at least we can use it as a general. If I've got something that it says it's worth 1,000, or if it says, you know what, $50, at least it's going to give me an idea.
It gives a good representation of whether a domain name is valuable or not, really. It's used as a baseline for me personally.
What do you think the biggest mistake is that domain investors make?
The biggest mistake that domain investors make is rushing in to purchasing domain names. Honestly, there's so many stories. If you look on any of the domain investment forums, for example, people rushing in, purchasing domain names, being really excited about those domain names, wanting to sell them straight away for hundreds of thousands of dollars without getting that educational background. I think people could really go wrong with that. I mean, I know. There's a famous story in the domain investment industry where someone spent $300,000 essentially registering all of these domain names, and that was a really expensive lesson because not many of them sold. It was a really expensive mistake, but he's gone on to be a very good top broker in the industry. So, it's an expensive lesson, but it worked out for him.
What's one of those lessons that you've had?
So when I first started domaining, I purchased 64 domain names on eBay.
Okay.
Without really looking through the quality of them. I thought that they were amazing domain names. I used very few metrics to kind of determine that, but it was kind of gut feel that these are really good domain names. And I ended up letting them expire a year later.
Right.
So basically that means all my money went on that. Yeah. And then it was a case of wondering, well, what can I do better? What can I do different next time to make sure that I don't make the same mistake again?
Sure. Those lessons. We have our successes and then we have our learning experiences.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Yes.
So what are some of the metrics that you look for?
There's a lot of different metrics that a lot of different people use. Say in the aftermarket. So essentially after a domain name is purchased, it could be sold in the aftermarket at any point. Some of those metrics include the domain extension. So that would be .com. It would be the length. It would be the combination of letters, keywords within the domain name. Yeah, there's a lot of different ones, and price is definitely one of them. Right. You can spend a lot of money on a domain name, but in terms of getting a good return on investment, a lot of people tend to purchase quite low. So maybe $10, $50 on someone like GoDaddy auctions. And then building up the portfolio from there with all of these domain names gives you a good chance of providing a good return on investment.
Okay. Well, give us an idea of the typical fees at both the buyer and seller end.
So within the aftermarket, the fees can vary greatly. I mean, in terms of registration fees, they're pretty low. They're really accessible. So maybe $10 a year, $20 a year for a good .com domain name. But in terms of the aftermarket, these can range from $50 up to millions. The largest publicly disclosed domain sale of all time is $30 million for voice.com. So general desirability of a domain name can really push the prices up in some cases.
Wow. Voice or voices.com?
Voice, singular. Yeah.
Voice.com. All right. And how about fees for selling?
Good way of getting your domain names in front of people is to use a marketplace. For example, GoDaddy's marketplace is called Afternic. You go on there and you'd list your domain for sale, and then GoDaddy would go about pushing the domain name out to all of its partners. So we'd provide 75 million searches per month roughly from this service. And in terms of fees, there's no fees for listing a domain name at Afternic. Once you sell a domain name, it's a 15% commission rate if you're selling a domain name using Afternic name servers. Okay. So I feel like for the value that GoDaddy provides in that respect, it's a healthy commission to get.
Yeah. From what you've seen in all your years of being involved in this space, as far as earnings, the range for people would be, well, those losing money at doing this, through to probably a handful of people earning six figures. What could someone reasonably expect working at it for a couple hours, few hours a day?
Well, a majority of the people I speak to do this for a couple of hours a day alongside a regular job. I mean,
Okay.
There's so many people in the community that do this for a couple of hours a day. And some of them will make a few $100s a month. Some of them may be a few $1,000s a month. Maybe in some cases, sort of up into the 5 figures of 10,000 or more a month. And this can vary, but to get to those figures, it does take a little while. It does take a good foundation. It gives a good development of your portfolio. So there's a lot of different factors involved with getting to these regular levels, but it definitely can be done.
Yeah. How many domain names do these people have?
So myself personally, I've got maybe 20 or 30 domain names in my portfolio. So very, very few.
Yes.
But I'm very happy just to kind of have them. I like the domain names. I've kind of attached to them, which is probably a bad thing from a business side. But in terms of domain investors that spend a couple of hours a day on domaining, you could reasonably expect people to have maybe 50, 100. In some cases, there's 500, 1,000, maybe a couple of thousand. Right. It really depends on people's kind of ambitions within the domain industry, really.
Sure. You mentioned about domain extensions. How many extensions are there?
Oh, that's a great question. Do you know what? I don't know offhand, but I think there's probably a couple of hundred domain extensions. Okay, quite a few. There's something like 360 million domain names registered in the world at the moment. Wow. Around 140, 150 million those are .com. So that's a predominant domain extension for the industry and internet, really.
.ai is an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that one. Yes. Tell
us about that one.
So the .ai domain extension is an extension assigned to the Caribbean, somewhere, one of the islands in the Caribbean, but it's been kind of repurposed as a global domain extension. It's kind of taken off a little bit in terms of the popularity of the extension with obviously the rise of OpenAI and all of these artificial intelligence products. Yeah, there's a good appetite for .ai domain names at the moment, I think.
Yeah. I mean, officially it stands for that country, but people are, like you said, repurposing it as artificial intelligence. Do you see the .ai extension as potentially being valuable in the future?
I think that in terms of value in the future, these extensions can kind of come and go a little bit.
Okay.
In terms of long-term success, .com has always been the number one in the industry, and kind of rightfully so, because if you look at all the big companies in the world, they're using .com. Most of the startups start to use .com. So it's like the standard bearer, but these other extensions do have value. But again, I think that you need to look into them and be really, really up on your education on these.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other domain sites or places that you think would be helpful for people to know of to help in their success as a domain investor?
So in terms of other sites, I think that NameBio definitely does have some value.
Yeah.
GoDaddy has some really good products for helping domain investors in general. So from the purchasing side, there's GoDaddy Auctions, which is the number one place to buy and purchase domain names as a domain investor in the aftermarket. We have Afternic, so we can sell on there. There's Domain Academy. There's all of these. But there's also offline. There's some really good opportunities for networking. So next month, I'm off to Stockholm for a domain conference. At the end of that month, there's another conference in Texas, which is widely attended by newer investors. So it's good offline opportunities as well for weirdly an online community, really.
That's an excellent idea, because I've always found that any industry that I've been involved in, I've dove into the conferences and you learn so much. Yeah. And you connect with people and mentors. And I was involved in the self-storage industry for about 18 years. And so I would go to conferences there. And I remember meeting one gentleman there, and I was asking him about his involvement in the industry. And he said, I'm not in the industry yet, but I'm thinking about getting in. So he was just there to find out information. And so when you said that, I thought, what a terrific place for someone that's thinking about going into the industry, because they can connect with people and say, all right, what's the reality here? Like in this day and age, do I have a shot at it? How do you do it? What do you do it? What are your best resources, both locally and 100%, internationally?
100%. Yeah, I completely agree. There's the one at the end of May is a great conference to go to.
Where's that one?
It's in Austin, Texas. It's called NamesCon. And GoDaddy's definitely going to be there. So
Yeah.
If anyone listening to this does end up going to NamesCon, then please come and find me at the GoDaddy booth.
Say hello.
Definitely say hello.
Awesome. What was been your most memorable or special domain name that you've bought or sold or chosen to keep?
The one that stands out for me that I've always regretted selling is one that I purchased a long, long time ago, probably a couple of years into my domain investing journey. It was staycool.com.
Staycool.com?
Yeah, staycool.com.
Nice.
I had a real affinity for that domain name, and I ended up chatting with some really interesting people based on that. So I ended up chatting with the CEO of Under Armour because they were interested in it at one point in time. And they didn't purchase it eventually, but it's just nice to kind of chat with people in different industries and kind of get their insight into why they want to purchase a specific domain name.
But I'm just thinking, someone wanting to buy a domain name, if there's somebody like Under Armour, they probably don't want to disclose in the early stages of who they are as a buyer, because then they feel that they might get taken advantage of or the price jacked up. Is that a valid concern?
For some people, yeah. That's partially why GoDaddy provides a domain brokerage service. So GoDaddy works with potential buyers to acquire domain names as well. So yeah, we cover all bases for domain buyers and domain sellers, really. So it is a valid concern, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is there something that I should have asked you that I haven't?
I think that reinforcing the fact that a really good education in whatever form it takes is the best way to get into domain names before you even buy a domain name. I think that it's really important to get a good foundation of knowledge. Yeah, but just in general, I think that getting into the community, being part of the community of domain investors, you can learn so much from people. So just getting involved, getting educated, come on board, come and find me.
Yeah. And I love the low barrier to entry.
Yeah, depending on the purchase price of the domain name, you can enter for pretty low. And a lot of people get started with those sort of the $10 purchases. You can spend obviously thousands and millions of dollars on a domain name, but for most investors, they do start on a low level, and it's probably one of the most accessible side hustles out there in terms of the barrier of entry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, James?
So the best way to connect with me probably is through email. So jiles@godaddy.com. I'd always love to hear from potential domain investors or current domain investors. And you can also follow me on Twitter at James Iles, so JamesIles. Please mention me, please at me, please DM me. Always happy to chat with domain investors or people who kind of just want to know a little bit more about domain investing in general.
Oh, that's very generous of you, James. Thank you. And we'll make sure that information is in the show notes.
Yeah, no, really appreciate that.
So what's your best tip for someone wanting to be successful buying and selling domain names for fun and profit?
Well, for fun and profit, I think fun and profit are kind of two different things. For profit, it's definitely to get educated. I think that is one of the most important things that we can do. As I say, Domain Academy, really helpful place to start with that. And just being immersed in the industry, reading the blogs, reading the current news, finding out about domain sales, kind of getting your finger on the pulse of what's happening, getting an idea, getting immersed in the world. It can really help in the long run. Yeah.
As a side note to that, are there any good Facebook groups that you know of that are provide a good community in that regard?
So domain investors that I know tend not to gravitate towards Facebook groups.
Okay.
There's, follow me on Twitter and I can kind of show you a few good Twitter profiles to follow.
Okay.
There's a central area of domain name blogs. There's a lot of things. So if anyone's interested, just kind of follow me on Twitter really, and I can show you from there.
Well, thank you so much, James, for sharing your tips, your expertise in domain investing, and for being today's side hustle hero.
Awesome. I really appreciate it, and thank you for having me on.
I started this episode by wondering if someone today could still make money through domain investing. According to today's expert, James Iles, yes, it's definitely possible. But he did point out that there are a lot of different factors in getting to that point, not the least of which is putting in the time to learn about the industry. If it's something that you want to explore or take a deeper dive into, I encourage you to take him up on his offer and reach out to him on Twitter and ask him about which blogs to read and what Twitter profiles he'd recommend you follow. Domain investing is appealing because of its low-cost entry point, ability to do it from anywhere, and you've got complete control as to when and how much time you devote to it. But one word of advice that I want to share that James and I didn't touch on. When you come across a domain name that's available to buy and you think you've hit the jackpot, triple check the spelling so that you're 100% sure you're buying what you think you're buying. Just saying. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find a link to James's Twitter account on our website, sidehustlehero.com. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know you're listening and tell me how this podcast is helping you. You can tag me or send a DM on Instagram at Joan Posivy. Thanks for listening and hustle on.